For over 1,000 years, Western civilization has been stuck in a dark age of sexual repression and misinformation. We get an oversexed overload from the media, but nothing in the way of honest, helpful, practical information on sex and how to do it right. That sucks, and I'm fucking sick of it. My name's JV Altheras, and I've spent a couple decades learning everything I can about how to have amazing sex and more of it. Not in a classroom like a lot of people who talk about sex. I learned it all in the gutter, right where Mom told me I'd end up. It's my mission to bring an end to the sexual dark age with brutally honest talk and education on all aspects of sex and sexuality, in an atmosphere that will keep you entertained without treating you like an idiot. Shara and I are not doctors. Certifiable, perhaps, but not certified in any way. And that means we don't have to talk about vaginas and penises to maintain academic credibility. You got a problem with a vagina? Call a gynecologist. You want to learn more about pussies and cocks and how to make them happy? You've come to the right place. Greetings and welcome to episode 82 of Ending the Sexual Dark Age. Say hello, Shara.
Hello.
Well, you're supposed to make it more entertaining than that.
Well, you just said say hello.
Well, all right, that was supposed to be inspirational. I didn't say just say hello.
Well, how about good evening?
There you go. How about, hey, sexy people out there on the internet?
Hey, sexy people out there on the internet, because my voice doesn't sound so sexy right now.
Well, some people may beg to differ. You know, some people like that husky, sound like you smoked one too many cigarettes voice.
So I feel like I smoked packs and packs.
Today we have a very special episode because our friend Paul, who's been our medical advisor since damn near the beginning of the podcast, we finally have on the air. Hello,
Yay.
Paul.
Hello, JV, and hello, Shara.
Hi. And
I do like that sexy husky voice.
See? So Paul has been giving us medical advice, and a lot of times it hasn't even made it to the air. People will write in with medical-related questions. He has always been very willing to assist us in helping people get on down their path. However, we finally came up with an episode topic that was enticing enough that we got him on the air.
How about that? And it wasn't even my husky voice that did it.
No, but it was interesting because you, just as I'm listening to episode 79, I hear something and said, that would be a great episode, and then Shara called me out.
So episode 79, we talked about a listener question from someone who was asking, it was a submissive with PTSD who was having trouble finding dominants who were interested in playing with her. Mm-hmm. Which is sad because, you're going to be in whatever community is in your locality, but that is certainly not the case you have anywhere and everywhere. But, Paul, let's tell the audience a little bit in more detail than what they already know about your qualifications. So what brings you here?
What brings me here? Well, I've been in healthcare, as we used to say in the Army, since Christ was a corporal. I started at 17. I have done about everything you can in healthcare. I am not a physician, but I am a prescriber and I have my own independent practice. And I've done ER, ICU, and it could just go on and on until it's quite boring. But how did I end up here is I was listening to, I stumbled across the podcast early on, I think episode 3, and JV made mention of doing stuff with shared dildos that made me quite nervous. So I reached out and said, hey, you need somebody to provide some healthcare information and verification. I'm willing to help. Here's my bona fides. JV went and looked through all my stuff and said, okay. And I have been in the scene probably, I think my first official thing I did was in California in 1986 and met a pro-dom, and have been in various aspects of the scene as both as a participant, as a provider. We had a training program here for doms and subs, and I was actually the class cock for the CBT demo. With one of my favorite dominatrix, so that was kind of fun. I have actually been through the Dungeon Master certification program, and I've been to a couple of the national programs actually that don't exist anymore. Spent a weekend out in a campsite doing some pretty interesting things. So I understand the healthcare side of it. I understand the healthcare needs of folks that are in BDSM. I have had people come into my office who didn't realize that I was part of the scene, who do what they can to shock me. And, oh, my master said this. And I'm like, oh, okay, who's your master? And they tell me, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I know them. They were blah, 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 blah. So it kind of takes some of the fun out because they're deliberately trying to shock the provider. And in my case, the provider just said, oh, yeah, okay, I know them. So it's something that I believe as a healthcare provider, everybody needs to have proper education and somebody they can come to say, you know, I do this and this is what happened, but I really can't go to normal people. Right. So I like to be that person, and that's why I reached out to JV and Shara when the podcast first started. And I do have to put a disclaimer in here, JV, so that you know, what I say here basically is a general educational nature, and we're presented as a guide to discussion, and so you can talk to your healthcare provider. You know, I'm not certified as a psych person. I'm not, don't have any of that, but I'm giving general guidance, and I do have some significant education from the military side when I was in the Army with folks with PTSD in general, plus many years of working in the ER, working in the intensive care unit. Matter of fact, one place I worked, somebody wanted me to write out some stories that they could use for PTSD presentations, and I wrote them out, and I went, well, damn, I've got all those. So I kind of look at it from all different sides.
Okay, so and with respect to PTSD in particular, I know you kind of perked up on that, and I know you said that you have been in an experience where, or you have had an experience where a submissive had a bad PTSD reaction out of nowhere.
Yes, lovely young lady that I was playing with. She was sexually open, but she had not really done BDSM before. I'd known her for some time. She said, hey, and she trusted me, knew who I was, and put her up. I had her face to the wall on a cross, and started doing just some gentle flogging, and I don't think she was up there more than 10 minutes, if that, and she just almost went rigid. And I like, okay, I'm going to stop this. She couldn't even say red, yellow, green, purple, or anything. I walked up, got up next to her, hugged her, like, okay, what's going on? And she was hardly able to talk. Took her down, sat her down, did the wrap her up, blanket, hug her, talk to her. And it turns out that she was from a very strict religious group that happens to be in our general area. And part of her growing up insisted a lot of physical abuse and beatings and things like that. So when she was up on the cross and all that vulnerable, and she was just getting light flogging, she just went right into her past history with her beatings and things like that. And it probably took me, I don't know, almost an hour to bring her down. It was kind of a shock to her. She had no expectation of anything like that. She was just looking to have a good time. And certainly I didn't expect it, but I have to say that having worked around folks that have had that, I was able to react pretty quick. But it is kind of a scary situation.
And she's probably very fortunate that when she was playing it, she was playing with you when that happened, because it could have been somebody who, has absolutely no experience or any kind of training. So she was probably very, very fortunate that she chose to play with you.
Of course I'm going to say yes.
And I'm going to agree with you. Because if that were me, I'd be like, oh no, I mean, some people wouldn't know what to do.
So as speaking, well, not totally in the hypothetical, so speaking from the standpoint of our listener who wrote in with her question, For someone who is suffering from PTSD, and it is an established case of PTSD that they're aware of, are there any particular suggestions you have for ways they should or should not approach kink, or perhaps more specifically impact play?
I think that it's a matter of they need to understand what the root cause of their PTSD is. If they just have this massive anxiety and truly don't know what it is, they're not going to have a real easy time being kink or doing kink, simply because they don't know why they're reacting the way they are. I have had, as I mentioned before, I'm going to jump off a little bit in that part of my practice has to do with addiction care. And many of the people that I see, men and women, as much as 85 to 95% of those people have had some sort of sexual trauma early on in their life, typically before they were 15 or 16. When someone is violated at that early of an age, they lose all sense of personal security and personal comfort. So they're typically drinking or they're doing things that are deliberately harmful. Now, when you talk about getting into kink, we are doing something that's deliberately, intentionally hurtful or harmful, but it's not permanent. And trying to split out the good from the bad is really a challenge. So they need to have ideas of what it is going on underneath. What was the PTSD caused by? Many people, it's rape at any age. It's car accidents. You watch somebody else die. You have been in a military setting, and you think, okay, I'm cool, I'm good, I can handle this. And then something as simple as a smell can trigger you.
Shara and I, a couple of years ago, when we were at Desire, one of the other couples that was there, he suffered PTSD from combat stress.
Okay.
Golf. And he had never really identified as kinky before. He identified primarily as a swinger.
Okay.
And they actually ended up coming on the trip through our show. So they found us first, and then Life on the Swing Set afterwards. And we had some very interesting conversations towards the end of the trip. He was at least thinking through the possibility of subbing for impact play to try and, for lack of a better term, take control of what was uncontrollable for him. So being in a painful situation, but one that he had control over. So do you have any thoughts along those lines?
Actually, I have. There was a friend of mine I met her through this scene, and she had the PTSD, had a horrendous life, and she and one of the dames actually did a very long, deep, horrendous, from the outside looking scene where it took her from where she was at and all that stuff and sort of beat it out of her. And she found it to be very cathartic and very helpful. She was, there I am doing it again. So the scene was very deep, very powerful, very emotional. It was very physical, and she came out of the other end of it smiling and laughing and feeling like a whole new person. So, yes, there is a way, but you have to have somebody who's very, very experienced. You have to have someone who understands what it is they need to look for, and be prepared that if it goes south, you know how to take care of it, or you have backup. It's not something that I would recommend doing, going to a house and just you and the person who's got PTSD are going to do the scene. You need to have someone else there who is both a safety monitor and experienced in the scene, has a bit of background in the, at least a little bit of counseling or, peer counseling kind of background to make sure that everybody gets out of it okay.
So that brings me to a question. Let's say that you're a submissive and you're trying to find a good dominant to play with, but you have the PTSD, so you're trying to figure out if it's a good, if it's a good mix for you or not. And so, but some people don't want to tell people that they're dealing with PTSD because they're afraid that it will scare that person away. Do you have any recommendations for, say, a submissive that might be going to a munch and she's getting to know people? When do you open up about the fact that you have PTSD, and how can you, what kind of questions can you ask somebody to make sure that they can handle it? Because some people are like, well, I just want to find someone that'll play with me even though I have PTSD. Well, I'm more worried about that submissive that is looking for a dominant to play with them. You know what I'm saying? And they have PTSD. I want to make sure that they're protected, that they're getting, doing the research to get into the right hands of someone to play with. So the fact that you mentioned having a third or for having several people there, one or more other, besides just the two that are playing, is a good idea. But how do you start looking for somebody if you're, trying to find someone to play with and you're intelligent and all that?
And especially if you're inexperienced.
Right.
People who have been in the lifestyle for a long time have the vocabulary and have, people that they know that help them feel help them get an air of confidence and an understanding of what it is they're looking for. But I guess it's always the new folks we're most worried about.
Yes, certainly they're the most worried about it. Typically when somebody shows up at a munch, they have had a connection with somebody running the munch. And I know here when I first came to town, I had found the munch and I had a referral from where I was at before and was able to get right back in. But when I started going to some of the play parties, I had a phone conversation with the person hosting the party and had a chance to say, here's who I am, here's what I'm doing, and here's the people that I would like to meet. So I would say that when you got a munch, and again here there is one person there's male and female that have been running the munch for a significant period of time, and they know all the players. And they also know, if you've got one person that likes edge play, you go see this person. If you want somebody who's new and is an intro, this is who you talk to. It depends on whether they want opposite sex or the same sex for their top. But I would start talking to the person running the munch and say, I'm coming. Here's what I want to do. I've got some things that are, I need to connect with somebody who does the right things, knows what they're doing, is experienced, and is reasonably sensitive to new people coming into the scene. And then when you're negotiating your scene, you're going to say, it's my first time. I'm really nervous about this. I don't know what it's going to feel like. I don't know that you necessarily have to disclose that you've got PTSD right off the bat, because what's the standard response? So they're a crazy person, and I don't want to have a scene with a crazy person. Because you have PTSD does not mean you're a crazy person. It means you've got triggers that haven't quite been sorted out yet.
That's very helpful, because I think there's a lot of people out there that aren't sure. So you've given some great advice of people that are, especially if they're new, what to do, who to go to. Well,
and we'll get right back to this. However, first, we have to have a word from our sponsors.
Okay.
When we were researching budget bondage gear at a listener's request, we stumbled onto ExtremeRestraints.com and found the most impressive bondage gear site on the internet. And we don't say that lightly.
We bought a bunch of toys to try them out, And we're so impressed with the selection, quality, and service that we reached out to them about sponsoring the show.
From basic whips to top-notch floggers, from beginner cuffs to shackles and cages, from nipple clamps to fucking machines, from budget to bad fucking ass, ExtremeRestraints.com has put together an immense catalog of kinky gear that we honestly believe is second to none on the internet.
And not only do they offer a free gift and 99-cent toys for new customers, plain brown wrapper shipping, and free shipping on orders over $119, they'll give you 10% off if you enter the promo code ESDA at checkout.
And that's not 10% off on your first order. It's 10% off every order, forever, as long as you enter the code. Because they're awesome and they support this show. You can listen to episode 70 for more details, or just check out ExtremeRestraints.com, use the promo code ESDA, and get your kink on. And we're back. Shara's taking pictures of the cat, so she's not paying attention to us right now.
Oh, I see.
I'm paying attention. I can multitask. I've given you a blowjob and touched my pussy at the same time. So
that I don't think that counts as multitasking.
I think it does. Personally, let's take a
Giving
vote.
me a blowjob and playing the piano at the same time counts as multitasking.
Well, we know that's not happening because we don't have a piano here.
But only because I don't have a piano here.
I'd like to see that one. Wow.
I probably would be playing with my toes on the piano.
You know, I'm just going to leave it however.
So, to get back to PTSD, so another approach, and I believe we talked about this when we were doing the listener mail, that I have encountered, although I don't have great personal experience with playing with people who have active PTSD triggers. Another approach that I've encountered is to try and use kink to desensitize, which I have seen to have worked. However, it was a perilous road. You know, that is, I think, the path of greatest resistance, and I have seen it be successful, but it's also a matter of having the control and being with someone who has the control to take you right up to the edge, but never go past it, or almost never go past it. So you have any thoughts on using it for desensitization?
Well, yeah, and I do think there is a place for it in desensitization, but you have to have a skilled top. And it's one of those things where you got to get the top or the dom, whatever verb you choose or word you choose to identify as. First off, you got to toss out your ego. And you got to sit and look at yourself and say, am I ready to deal with a psychological emergency? Is it going to trigger me and scare the bejeebers out of me? It's not a laughing matter. So you got to sit back and you have to ask what's going on. You got to listen to that person. You've got to observe. You almost need the dungeon master level of true understanding, because even if you take a dungeon master course, there are they cover a lot of those elements and what to look for. What do you deal with somebody when they're, quote, melting down? And you have to be ready for that. Even if you're an edge player dom and you say, well, I'm just gonna keep going and just keep beating them, well, you're really gonna make a mess of them. So you really have to be aware and be willing to take on that risk, because if you push somebody too far over the edge, instead of desensitizing them, they could theoretically end up admitted into a psychological needs repair unit.
Yeah, not good.
Yeah, well, and the top always, for good and obvious reason, you know, the top takes the lion's share of the safety responsibility, because the top has to. And I think one other aspect that's worth mentioning is if you are a top and you are, for whatever reason, not comfortable or confident playing with somebody who's got triggers, you should, by all means, feel free to not do it.
Absolutely.
We, as dominants, we feel like we should be up for every challenge. And I think sometimes that's an unhelpful impulse. There are certain challenges that we should not be interested in if they do not fall in with our personality type. Just as somebody should not be a service top if their kink is so interconnected with their sex that they are terribly disappointed if they play kinky and don't have sex afterwards. It's not good. It's not right, wrong, or indifferent. It just means that being a service top should not be on your path.
Right.
And when you want someone to play with, especially if you don't have a consistent playmate, it can encourage us to try to take on challenges or take on greater challenges perhaps than we should take on. And this is one of those safety things where I would encourage people to show restraint.
Right.
And if you really like somebody, then do the research, and like Paul mentions, is, get out there and get other people to, join in, and where it's not just two people playing, but you have other people there, so something goes wrong. But do the research, because it's out there,
Mm-hmm. And it takes some skill when somebody starts melting down and they have a PTSD type reaction. It's not just the standard where you've had a really great scene and they cry and they're dribbling and drooling all over the place. That's not even close to what a PTSD response would be. The other thing I would add to that is the bottoms have, they do have responsibility when they're starting to speak up, and as I said, not necessarily say that they have PTSD, but say, I have some things that we need to be careful of, and pay attention to what your top's response is. If they're not grokking what you're talking about, then you have to walk away or have to be willing to accept rejection because it's in your own safety. And ask the dom for repetition. You say something, they go, yeah. Say, no, do you tell me what I just said so that I know you understand what I was talking about? And don't hesitate to holler red if the situation's out of control, if you're able to. And you got to make sure the dom, again, after that, if they're not able to, you have to make sure the dom is paying attention.
Right.
And the other thing that I just occurred to me is the other thing you can do is also approach the dungeon master if you're in a group setting and there's always somebody that's keeping an eye on the way things are going. Talk to the dungeon master or the host of the party and say, hey, I need to do this scene and I've got some triggers, I've got some things, and can you keep an eye on me? And any host or dungeon master worth their salt is certainly going to be keeping an eye on it to make sure that there is backup and there's not an emergency that they have to call outside people in for.
That's a great idea.
Very good idea.
It's fortunate when you have medical standing by. So,
I'm going to be doing something in a couple of weeks that is, there actually are 3 or 4 of us that have either street experience or higher level prescriptive experience backup that we've done emergency care and stuff like that. So it's going to be probably one of the safest big parties that I've been to.
Nice.
And I'm going to give you a little bit of history about. I was going to do this at the beginning, but a little history about PTSD in general. It's now called post-traumatic stress disorder, which years ago, when you start reading things, I was reading Robert Silverberg's version of Gilgamesh a couple weeks ago, and they have a perfect description in the story of Gilgamesh, which is Babylonian times, of PTSD. There's stories in the Bible, Greek and Roman literature. Shakespeare talks about it in Henry IV. There's a lot of stories of Civil War. Napoleon, World War I, it was called shell shock or combat fatigue. And they found that by pulling people away from combat and sending them back home, they absolutely crippled them. If they pulled them away from the front line, put them in a safe place, fed them, let them sleep, in a couple of days they were actually ready to go back into combat, and they did not have the terrible things that they have. And now, of course, as the we started realizing that you don't have to be in combat to have a post-traumatic stress disorder. You get severe auto accidents, rape, robbery, emotional, whatever psychological injuries are going on. So it is something that is much more recognized, and there's much more treatment available. The unfortunate thing is that if somebody has something going on, what's the first thing that healthcare tends to do to help you? They put you on a drug. And unfortunately, one of those drugs is benzodiazepines. You got to have your Xanax or your Valium or whatever. Well, the recent literature and research shows if you're on any of those drugs for PTSD, it's not helping you. It doesn't let you process what's going on. So if you've got somebody, if you happen to be somebody who's got PTSD and you're seeing, your psychiatrist or whoever, and they're keeping you on a benzodiazepine, you're not likely to ever get it completely worked through because you're not, I guess the best way to put it is you're not in your right mind because you've been drugged and you're not able to process and work out through all that stuff.
Benzos do definitely, they kind of turn the volume down on everything. So
it's like having a wet blanket wrapped around your brain. Can't think.
It's an emotional mute button.
Yes, and you need to have the emotional unmuted so that you can work through the process. Even though it's painful short term, it doesn't cripple you long term.
Interesting. And that's why we call professionals.
Yes, absolutely.
I call Paul.
Anytime you need, Shara.
So hopefully this will be the first of many guest appearances on the show. We're trying to treat you nice.
Yeah, you're doing a good job. And I think that there are a number of things that we can talk about. And now that we've got all of our setup working fine, we can put it together pretty quick.
Yeah, and so and I will invite you anytime. We will continue to just periodically send you the medical related stuff we get in email, and you don't have to wait for us to suggest bringing you on. I mean, if you see something that you feel like you have something to say about, it's always an excuse to podcast.
We like those excuses.
Yeah, it's always
especially
good to.
With you.
Yeah, on the PTSD topic, I mean, we covered all the things that we were thinking that we wanted to cover, but is there anything else at all that you'd like to say on the topic, or on anything else for that matter?
Yeah, the interesting thing, not so much on the PTSD part, but when I first got into BDSM, my marriage at the time was really a mess, and it was functionally over. And I went and I found that when actually at that point, I could really take some pretty heavy, pretty intense flogging and pretty intense pain, and realized that I was depressed, and that was my antidepressant.
Okay.
And once I got on an antidepressant, I couldn't take as much. I wasn't as much of a heavy hitter, so to speak. So it was very interesting for me that my intro to BDSM, I was married, but I was lonely, and we hadn't slept together for a year, all of those things that go into a really shitty marriage. And it was my antidepressant. Although I had to sneak out and do some crazy shit to get to those things, but
hey, oxytocin.
Yeah, that's truly what it is. And it was then when I got on a true antidepressant, it was quite a striking change. My level of tolerance was way down.
Interesting.
But I do find that there is a wonderful place for it. If, as I said, if I don't have attention once in a while, it's a challenge. It's not you look at addiction, it's not really an addiction, but you really miss it.
I know, I miss it when I don't beat Shara often enough.
Yeah, well, it's you really haven't, that's a fun part, but you really haven't experienced the trip through the pain and where it can take you. There is a piece missing, because I switch, and I like to be the bottom because it's easier. It's not as much work. Doesn't mean that I can't.
I believe you.
Yeah, I would much rather.
And I don't ever want to find out. I have to do the work to find out.
I thought you were going to start switching at Fetish Fair Flea, Shara.
No. I think that's Sexy Pixie.
I'd probably line you up to beat Sexy Pixie. Yeah, it's.
I definitely think Sexy Pixie is the one that is a switch. I have no interest in doing that, but I like to watch. That's no problem.
But you do have an interest in pleasing your master. So what if, for the sake of argument, that it would please me to see you give a flogging?
Yeah, you'll make fun of me and how poorly I swing because, you know.
No, that's only when you got to flog me.
Oh, no.
She actually got to flog me, Paul.
Yeah, well, flogging once and, learning it is not the same as having somebody experienced really take it out on you.
Yeah,
exactly.
She wasn't really into it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think back to Ginger and Prop and when we were at Desire, and Prop, bends over and says, hit me as hard as you can. So I do, with my left hand, and I'm right-handed.
Uh-huh.
So I do. And he looks at JV and he says, is that the best she has?
So, and she's not painting the whole picture. Okay,
Oh.
We're at Desire. We're down in the lobby, and the music is playing. And Prof runs up wearing nothing but glow bracelets and a metallic gold pair of underwear. And starts shaking his ass for Shara.
He shook it quite nicely. He shook it quite nicely.
And she smacks him a few times with her left hand.
Uh-huh.
And I'm right-handed.
Yeah.
So, he looks at JV, is that the best she has? So, he says, well, she's hitting you with her left hand and she's right-handed. So, of course, now I have to hit him with my right hand. And, of course, I didn't do much better. So, at that point, I say, yeah, no, we'll let somebody else do that job, and I'll gladly, have someone bruise their hand while they're swatting me.
Yeah, it's much easier to be the bottom. It is fun occasionally to be the top, but
I believe you.
But it's just simpler. And I've had some really good female doms that play with, and I am more of a smart ass in the scene. I will say, hey, you hit like a girl. And then it gets pretty intense. And so I'm usually, I will actually start, because the music's always good, I'll start dancing while I'm getting flogged. It's just, I have fun.
So, you should meet Sexy Pixie, because she's good. I mean, because I met her as a submissive, right?
She has not yet embraced the fact that she is a switch.
Oh, I think she's going to get there quite fine.
Although anyone who has seen her swing a flogger will tell you that she is a switch. Sometimes you have to come to these things in your own time.
Now,
yes.
Have her flog me? Oh, darn, sure.
What's a date? Where's my phone?
Oh, darn, they're too far away.
I can get her master on the phone in about 2 minutes. We're going to see him next month. We're just lining up shenanigans for the convention at this point.
So
we don't even know what's planned so far.
Where's this convention at?
It is Fetish Fair Flea, which is in Rhode Island.
Oh, okay.
Providence.
Oh.
It is our first year going, but we have a number of good friends who are East Coasters, and they have been going for many years. And it is, the original description I got was, imagine that a convention takes over an entire hotel.
Okay.
And there are so many vendors that they buy out all the first floor rooms and use them as overflow vendor space.
Okay.
And we are in the second overflow hotel.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
So, it's shaping up to be rather amazing. Our friend Duncan is very close with some people who run a local dungeon, and they do not have it open, but he has gotten them to provide the dungeon for our use on Saturday night.
Nice.
invite only, yes. That is, so we're looking forward to that, and also seeing good friends who we don't see often enough.
All right, well, I'm going to walk us on out the door here. Thank you once again, everybody, for joining us for another fun-filled episode of Ending the Sexual Dark Age. Today, we actually got to be educational, which is what we're always going for, but we know some days there are questions. We will be back again soon. However, you are free to send questions, comments, tirades, and insults to jvaltheros@gmail.com or jvshara@gmail.com. Send me the insults. Or follow us both on Twitter I am at jvaltheros. She is at jvs_shara. Or come find us on Facebook. We are here and we are accessible. Until next time. This is JV and Shara reminding you that sex is one of the greatest things in life, but there is always room for better.
Always. And thank you, Paul.
Good night. Thank you for the invite.